Hi, my name is Megan, and today I will be doing my presentation on the Black Mirror episode Eulogy. I will be analyzing it through the lens of actor network theory because I thought it was really fitting for this specific episode as I was watching it. The core ideas for actor network theory, which I'm going to refer to as ANT for the rest of this presentation, is how technologies are active agents within our society and how power and action are both given to human and non-human agents. So when looking through and it can help to map the relationships between these networks of agents, human and non-human. And then also I will use it to analyze how the agency flows between human and non-human agents when it comes to technology. So first, I'm going to give an episode description. This episode is from the most recent season. It's season 7, episode 5. These are the characters slash agents in the episode. Our first main character is Phil Connerty. He is an isolated man on the East Coast, and he is made aware of the death of an ex-girlfriend through a funeral program called Eulogy. And then there's Carol Royce, which is the late ex-girlfriend of Phil, whose face is forgotten, which is a big point of the plot. And then we have the guide, which is the technology that in the Eulogy program. And the guide is a generated avatar created to aid Phil in his journey through the technological eulogy process. Just a quick summary of the episode. Phil receives a phone call that requests for help with the funeral for Carol, the late ex-girlfriend. He agrees to try out the technology to help with the funeral, and he receives like a package with this little circular thing that he'll put on his like head. And the guide talks to him through that. So you're hearing audibly through this like little disc, kind of like the size of an air tag that goes to the side, and he can hear through it and interact with the guide. And the whole eulogy program is part of like this grieving process and immersive image experience with the guide. And he's trying to remember the face of Carol from when she was young because they'll use the like photos and data for the funeral. So he can pull up a picture and this technology will immerse him into it. For my scenes analyses, I'll be going over 3 scenes that I feel like show some distinct situations of like power and control between the human and non-human agents in the episode. So the first scene that I wanted to go over is the first use of the eulogy technology. He receives the package and he puts it on, as you can see right here in that like little disc on the side of his head. And there is an introduction. The eulogy guide starts to give an introduction for the funeral, and this technology has been sent out by the daughter of the late ex-girlfriend. So she's sending this out to multiple people, and he agrees to it. The guide gives him this intro, but he chooses to skip it. So that kind of like shows this analysis of like this transition between who is in power. So the technology is giving him this predetermined kind of spiel in the beginning to let them know, here's how this is going to work, here's what the purpose is, and he opts to skip it. He takes control of the situation, and you see that shift of power. Um, but the guide doesn't, when she has him combine the photos, she tells him that they can take a deeper dive into it. And because he skips the intro, he doesn't understand how it works. And quite literally, like the disc transforms him. As you can see, his like eyes are lit up and it puts him in like this different kind of meta world when you think about it and allows him to walk around the images. And this is an expression of this technology is taking power. It's taking control of the situation. Phil is no longer in control. The technology quite literally has the power over his brain and his mind to be able to elude him into that. And I think that is kind of the first transition of this power looking through Ant. Um, is in this first usage of it, and you see how much control it can have. The next thing I want to look over is an argument between Phil and the guide, which occurs actually in this specific image. He's looking back at a picture from when they were in a band. And I put here the conversation that they have, the few little notes. So first is Phil, and he says to her, "Are you supposed to be annoying? Is that how they coded you?" She responds, I wasn't coded, I was more generated. Then he says, generated from some digital asshole. And then shortly thereafter says sorry, to which she says, apology accepted. And there was something that I thought was really interesting about this is how, to an extent, because this God is the generated avatar, he sees it more eye to eye, right? So when he's in these images, he sees her as a woman who's standing there and talking to him. And thus that technology is giving her agency, right? He's seeing this visual analysis of a human being, and he's not seeing it as a piece of technology. He's seeing it more eye to eye in this agent and how he's interacting with it. And they're arguing before because in the context of the episode, he is going through this process and he's very much dogging on this ex of his. Um, and he is going through and he's like, "Oh, well, she did this and she didn't do this, and we were in a band," and the technology is arguing with him back, right? So it's taking control of the situation. It's having the power to have this conversation, and you're seeing this transition between both of them to where they can bicker and have this interaction, but she's not real. She is not a real human being with like full thoughts and emotions. She's just generated avatar. And so I thought that was an interesting piece to show this technology taking a step forward and having um that power and authority. The final episode, spoiler ahead, is the funeral. So, um, a big part of, not necessarily a big part of the plot, but in the beginning, they let him know that there will be a funeral, to which he goes, I'm not going to attend. So the starting point is how he's not going to attend the funeral, yet at the end, he ends up going to the funeral. So he goes through the entire process, this entire grieving process through the whole show, from jumping between images, analyzing his relationship with her, what happened in their past, and how they broke up, how it went down, to remembering her face. And he actually does get to remember her face at the end, which then leads us into the funeral. And I think that this is a really important scene for two reasons. I think the first part is it shows how this technology had power and control over him to change his mind. So if that, if it wasn't AI generated or something of that nature where he was fully interacting with it, it might not have had such an effect if it was just like an email from from the daughter of his ex-girlfriend saying, "Can we get some pictures of my mom?" Like I think it shows that it takes a much more like further standpoint. And additionally, we're seeing it affect his mental process. So through this aunt, we're seeing that the relationship and the dynamic between them is that it's having control over helping him grieve, helping him change how he sees his relationship with the ex-girlfriend. And it's more of, in a way, a therapist. Not that this guide is communicating healthily as a therapist, but we're seeing her act as one. She's having these conversations with him about their relationship and asking, how does this, why did you think of her like that? Blah, blah. And there's obviously a grand reveal, a twist to where he's having this conversation with her and uncovers that this generated avatar is the daughter of the ex-girlfriend, and that they were able to download her thoughts and opinions and generate this avatar that looks exactly like her, as they show in the funeral portion of the episode. And it kind of like furthers how it is creating more of an effect through technology, right? So he's getting this, oh, this is her daughter, and it creates this emotional connection where this technology once again is gaining more power because he's emotionally tied to it. He's seeing, oh, this is the daughter of my ex-girlfriend who he asked to be his wife. Like it is, and it changes the perspective of the whole episode because as he's recollecting everything and all their arguments, it's, oh, these are the thoughts coming from this generated daughter. Whether she actually feels that way or would not feel that way is not certain. And so we're also seeing this technology have agency over the daughter because since it is a generated portion of her, it is not really, there's not a certainty that this is how she would react or think on the situation. It's the technology making assumptions based on her habits and how it assumes she would think, right? And they obviously don't explain how they uploaded her data or her thoughts. So I thought that was really interesting about the funeral part. Additionally, It's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but each of the members of the funeral all have the eulogy side piece on their head, so they're not actually fully experiencing a funeral as one normally would, where you're walking in and you're with these people side by side, someone's presenting. Yet, and I think this is another thematic point, Phil and the daughter is are the only people in the funeral not wearing the eulogy pieces. She's playing the cello up front, honoring her mom. And they're the only ones there, and it kind of puts you back into this guide position where the technology now has influenced how he sees this young woman because of having her installed as the guide. So technology has taken control over their relationship as well, or just their relation in general. Whether they interact or talk, you don't know in the episode, but you can see that it's affecting how he's looking at her because he's interacted with her, but it wasn't really her. It was just technology, presuming the visual of her. And I thought that was also interesting. As for the audience, I really like this episode looking at it because it's a lot about grief and the process of the past. And to be completely frank, when I watched the episode, I did cry because as someone who's lost someone, like you can feel that through the show and his emotions. And I think when you look at it through the process of Ant, it's relaying this message that technology can aid in the process of grief. And I think that connects a lot to the real world right now with how you see people getting AI companionships, which was talked about a little bit in the lecture for this module. And I think that this is pushing that further and saying that it can, and it's standing in accordance in a little bit of a different way, but nonetheless a generative being that allegedly has its own thoughts and feelings. And this is showing us that it can do that. So the audience is meant to relay that and to take that in that technology can be an advancement in how you should process grief. And it doesn't have to be through person to person anymore. And I think that enhances the further showing of tech as its own agent. Even though it's not human, it still has agency and can have that control and power to help you grieve in a way one might see a therapist is supposed to do. Additionally, I thought since this is relayed through TV and is meant to connect the audience to their own grief, it's just interesting that you're watching this process of grieving through technology. So while it did make me emotional, when I'm seeing the story through TV, showing me further enhancing that I can aid in processing in my own grief through technology in that sense, right? Someone's telling me a story in a digital format, and my TV is passing that on to me and I am feeling from it. And so this piece of technology and all the technology that goes into making something, the TV, the cameras, the editing, all of that has its own power to then make me feel this way, to then have this control over how I'm processing this episode through my own grief. So that was my analysis on the episode of Eulogy through the Ant lens. And thank you for listening.